Turkey is concerned. And this is a major attack that happened from the Iranian side. You can see reporters there on ground. They're talking about these really, really dramatic developments and how there is fire in the background after this particular attack was reported at a US base in Turkey. So all of these things have come to fore so far. These are the developments that we will be continuing to speak about. This is another dramatic development that has come in as US Marines ended up shooting at protesters in Karachi. Remember, protests in Pakistan have been witnessed throughout ever since Khamenei was taken down. He was assassinated by US and Israel. And these protesters, particularly at the US Marines, the US consulate there, after the vandalism was reported and the protesters really gathered outside this particular venue, is when they were shot at. And these are the visuals that have been also doing the rounds. So all of these things have, in fact, been brought to fore. And that's something that we'll continue to, in fact, speak about. My colleague Akanksha is also standing right here in the studios with me. Strait of Hormuz is something that we've constantly been speaking about, and how this is going to be impacting the entire shipping and world oil as far as
that conversation now becomes even more critical, Griha, because there's been an attack on Aramco. Remember, the OPEC plus countries have vowed to increase the overall production. But if the attacks are going to happen at Aramco, then how will the OPEC plus nations even be able to increase their production in the next, say, 1 month or so by 35% is what they had pledged. Now, let me tell you where the Strait of Hormuz is. It's a very tiny place over here between the Persian Gulf and between the Arabian Sea, also adjoining to the Gulf of Oman. Now, why is Strait of Hormuz a leverage for Iran? Because it's adjacent to the port city or port bandar over there. And this choke point is now going to, in fact, if Iran is going to use that as leverage or as a bargaining chip by occupying this particular choke point over here, that Strait of Hormuz is, it's going to lead to increased costs. Also delay in the shipments. Why so? Because Strait of Hormuz is also a very key passage when it comes to, say, the overall 1/5 of the global exports in terms of energy, in terms of LNG. Much of India's own LNG is procured via the Strait of Hormuz. All of Europe, China, all of these countries.
The other aspect that we are looking for, and as Akanksha was mentioning, how this is just a 31-kilometer stretch, and that's how narrow this entire Strait of Hormuz is. One aspect that has come to fore, Akanksha, is while Iran is blocking each and every shipping vessel in the Strait of Hormuz, there is one particular country's vessel that has been allowed, and that's China.
Exactly.
And that is something that is completely...
You remember, if you look at the overall global scenario, it's not just about their nuclear program or the missile program. It is about oil. It is about energy. Venezuela is already under the US control. You're looking at Russia, which is heavily sanctioned. Where does China go to? Iran was their key supplier. And now if US does want to overtake China's own industrial advancements, it will have to be by curbing, by clamping down on their energy supplies, which go via the Strait of Hormuz. And as I said, it's not just bad news for China, it is bad news for India. Look at the rate at which Brent crude has opened up today. It's opened up above $80 per barrel, which was in fact 72 on Friday when the markets shut down. So this is indeed already impacting the overall energy and oil supplies, and we'll have to see for how long will Iran be able to occupy Strait of Hormuz.
Right, Akanksha, there with all of that information, we'll constantly take a look at developments that are happening in and around the Strait of Hormuz and how the entire world shipping now has to be rerouted from the Cape of Good Hope, which adds 10 to 17 days, in fact, to that entire shipping process. What happens to this entire global oil prices and Brent crude, for that matter, is a key concern that everyone is watching out for. We go into a very, very short break. With that, coming right back with all the developments.
That's exactly the point that we've also been discussing, and Tom was also saying that the target is meant to be these US assets in these ally countries, but because these are densely populated areas, they are inadvertently hitting civilian targets, because if civilians were indeed the target, the casualties could have been in hundreds.
That is, to use the American terminology, collateral damage.
Right, right. Lieutenant General D.P. Pandey, the sheer escalatory nature of this, as Ambassador Dogra was also highlighting, they've gone on to ask for Germany's help. They're also trying to involve France over here, because, say, UK has already reacted. In fact, Sir Keir Starmer also spoke about their fleet being involved. But if NATO were to get involved, what is the end game of this war? If NATO and these Middle Eastern US allies were to get involved, what happens? And Iran has already indicated that they are not looking towards any negotiations now.
Yeah, Kansha, it's too early for Iranians to talk about negotiations. It's just, again, this is something, not a war which is being fought between two street people. That also goes for a very long time. We are fighting a war with two military powers and two nations and two ideologies which are totally disparate and different. And it's about survival of Iranian regime's thought process, which is absolutely contrarian to this thing. While the Gulf states have already changed their thought process and they have aligned to the Western ideology to a great extent, but Iranians are totally polar opposite, and they have never changed their views for the last about 45-50 years. They remain where they remain. So to believe that it's going to just crumble, IRGC is not just not a slap dog onto a street that they can wish away. They will fight, they will control, and this will go on for some time. But I just want to add both the countries, the Israelis and Americans, and a lot of time people are saying that Trump has put Israel first this time. I don't think so. I think it's a war of Americans with Iran, and it is something to do with the Chinese. It is just not about Iran itself.
Yes, so I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, so I think I told last time also on your this thing on your channel, but American immediate political objective is to change the strategic orientation of Iran. They should give up the ballistic missile systems, and because that was threat not
who, what, where, when, why. You see the bits, I see the whole. To know the inside story on Iran, get with me inside the bunker. Only on CNN News 18.
That's exactly the point that we've also been discussing, and Tom was also saying that the target is meant to be these US assets in these ally countries, but because these are densely populated areas, they are inadvertently hitting civilian targets, because if civilians were indeed the target, the casualties could have been in hundreds.
That is, to use the American terminology, collateral damage.
Right, right. Lieutenant General D.P. Pandey, the sheer escalatory nature of this, as Ambassador Dogra was also highlighting, they've gone on to ask for Germany's help. They're also trying to involve France over here, because, say, UK has already reacted. In fact, Sir Keir Starmer also spoke about their fleet being involved. But if NATO were to get involved, what is the end game of this war? If NATO and these Middle Eastern US allies were to get involved, what happens?
And
Iran has already indicated that they are not looking towards any negotiations now.
Yeah, Kansha, it's too early for Iranians to talk about negotiations. It's just, again, this is something, not a war which is being fought between two street people. That also goes for a very long time. We are fighting a war with two military powers and two nations and two ideologies which are totally disparate and different. And it's about survival of Iranian regime's thought process, which is absolutely contrarian to this thing. While the Gulf states have already changed their thought process and they have aligned to the Western ideology to a great extent, but Iranians are totally polar opposite, and they have never changed their views for the last about 45-50 years. They remain where they remain. So to believe that it's going to just crumble, IRGC is not just not a slap dog onto a street that they can wish away. They will fight they will control, and this will go on for some time. But I just want to add both the countries, the Israelis and Americans, and a lot of time people are saying that Trump has put Israel first this time. I don't think so. I think it's a war of Americans with Iran, and it is something to do with the Chinese. It is just not about Iran itself.
Yes,
So
I'm
let's
glad you said that.
put out. Yeah, so I think I told last time also on your this thing on your channel, but American immediate political objective is to change the strategic orientation of Iran. They should give up.
Namaste, Jai Hind, Vande Mataram. Welcome to this special coverage as we continue to be on our non-stop rolling coverage about the fury in the Gulf. Viewers, I'm Anand Narasimhan. With me in the studio is Ambassador Rajiv Dogra, and there are a few concerns. We'll address them, talk about them after a quick check of the headlines at 2 p.m. this Monday afternoon. Saudi Arabia's Aramco Ras Tanura refinery shut down after a drone strike. Brent crude jumps to about 9% up from Sunday amid fears of a broader supply disruption in the escalating Middle East conflict. US F-15 fighter jet crashes in Kuwait amid West Asia war. Pilot ejects and survives as tensions soar. Cause unclear in the ongoing conflict. Death toll from Iranian missile strike on Israel's Beit Shemesh rises to at least 9, deadliest since war began, with dozens injured amid escalating Iran-Israel conflict. US President Donald Trump makes big claims on the killing of Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, asserting that he moved first to neutralize what he described as an imminent threat to his own life. US Embassy and consulates in Pakistan suspend services after violent protests erupted following the killing of Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Brent crude jumps 13% to $82.37 per barrel, highest since January 2025 as West Asia tensions and Strait of Hormuz disruptions push oil to 4-year highs, raising global energy concerns. Bharat urges restraint and dialogue as Prime Minister Narendra Modi speaks with Benjamin Netanyahu, calling for calm amid escalating Middle East tensions. The conflict in West Asia has entered its third day with escalating violence across the region. In the latest development, Iran has reportedly struck an oil refinery in Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, a US F-15 fighter jet crashed in Kuwait, though the pilot ejected safely. Kuwaiti authorities are investigating the cause of the incident. Iran claims it has inflicted significant damage on US assets in the region, including alleged drone strikes on bases in Kuwait and Bahrain and missile attacks on the USS Abraham Lincoln, which the US Army has refuted. They launched 4 ballistics, but they've been neutralized. The USS Abraham Lincoln is fully functional. These ballistics didn't even get there. That's what the Americans said. Kuwait's Ministry of Defense has confirmed several US fighter jets were involved in incidents, but all pilots are safe because they came in the way of friendly fire, largely because most of these systems of these nations are not talking to each other, and in a joint operation, that is very, very important. And that's why the F-16s have come under friendly fire while the Kuwaiti air defense systems were trying to negate the threat of the incoming wave of kamikaze drones from the Iranians. Now, the conflict has now drawn nearly all Gulf nations into this crisis, and in response to mounting security concerns, the UAE has shut down financial markets in Abu Dhabi and Dubai for 2 days. Global markets reacted very sharply, with gold and silver prices surging and the Indian rupee weakening against the dollar. Now, let's try and understand that even as we see multiple barrage of attacks by the Iranians, what they are doing is a low-cost counter-attack because they are using their kamikaze drones and their ballistic missiles technology because that's where their strength is, compared to the Americans and the Israeli, for whom this cost of this conflict is only mounting by the minute, viewers. Iran's missile barrage against the US-Israel. Now, let's try and understand. US-Israeli are pounding all these locations all across Iran. So there is the capital Tehran, there is the religious head, that is Qom. Then of course you have attacks which have come. Can we just go back to the previous graphic, please? Yeah, I was talking about, yeah, thank you very much. Now, US-Israel pounding Iran. There is Ilam, there is Kermanshah, Tabriz, Isfahan, Shiraz and Minab. Why all of these areas? Because most of the ballistic and nuclear operation sites and of course the IRGC headquarters and the bus militia headquarters. This is where these targets have been, and they're all located around these areas, these cities and these regions in Iran. Let's look at what has been the response. Iran has come back and struck almost all the regions all around it because they have taken attacks here in Israel. 9 killed, 121 is injured. Over in Iraq, in Erbil, 2 killed, 5 injured. In Kuwait, 1 killed, 32 injured. Bahrain, Manama, 4 injured. And of course, we had UAE, 3 killed, 58 injured. And Oman, 5 injured. All of these places, the Iranians claim they were targeting US bases there. But a lot of their projectiles have landed in civilian areas because of interception, because of debris, or because of the loitering munitions getting confused, or tall skyscrapers coming in the way, and there are thereby deflections happening and then civilian casualties or them landing in civilian areas. These are visuals that have come through in Israel's Quds. The IDF minister has said Hezbollah will pay a heavy price. News just coming through for firing rockets at Israel, and he threatened that Naim Qassem, the Secretary General of the Hezbollah, who decided to fire under pressure from the Islamic Republic, will be killed. That's the claim, and the IDF has not ruled out the option of putting feet on ground in Lebanon to do away with the threat of the Hezbollah. This even as the Lebanese government has said that they do not want the Hezbollah to use Lebanese soil for attacks against Israel and put lives of Lebanese civilians in danger. Akanksha now joins us with more. Yes, Akanksha. We'll try and go across to Akanksha in a bit. But now, this is the one head that still remains as far as Hezbollah. What the IRGC, what the Islamic Republic of Iran under the Ayatollah and the IRGC have been able to do, and so have their proxies, is decentralize the leadership, decentralize the command, which they have been doing for more than a decade and a half now, ever since Iraq and the war against Iraq happened, and of course the the regime change in Iraq happened. The Iranians learned a lesson saying if the central command is killed, then you cannot be headless, you cannot be leaderless, you cannot have no scope or a dimension of how to take the struggle or fight forward. And that's why, despite nearly 40 top commanders and leadership killed, the entire defense mechanism top downwards, we'll put that flowchart in a bit, of people being neutralized, assassinated or eliminated by US-Israeli operations, the IRGC and Iran continues to respond. And it's similar with the Hezbollah. Top leaders of the Hezbollah, the big names, along with Hamas and also of the Houthis, have all been neutralized. But now, again, the IDF saying that Naim Qassem, who's ordered this firing against the Israelis from using Lebanese turf, will also now be dealt with. He will be neutralized. Akanksha now joins us with more. The IDF not ruling out putting boots on ground in Lebanon to do the same.
Absolutely. Anand, in fact, in the latest that we are getting in is the defense minister's reaction. Israel's defense minister has already sworn in that all of these proxies, the militia proxies of Iran, will be dealt a severe blow. And as we all know, that today in itself, we've seen a set of renewed strikes targeting Hezbollah in Lebanon. They will not settle for anything but the end of Hezbollah this time around. They're saying any of these proxies, whether it is Hamas or Hezbollah, Hezbollah. Hamas, as we all know, has been nearly decimated. That was the big bone of contention to put the end to the war in Gaza. But more importantly, it is Hezbollah which seems to be resurfacing now, especially in this war against the United States and Israel. Ever since the killing of Ayatollah Khomeini, they swore that they will be seeking revenge, they will avenge the killing. But now, with the IDF targeting Hezbollah, what we can tell you in the latest inputs they are coming in, that the Secretary General of Hezbollah, Naim Qasim, has in fact already threatened action. He has decided to fire under pressure from the Islamic Republic and he will be killed. This is the response coming in from Israel's defense minister. Need not in fact expand much on how the IDF operates. Once they set their eyes on a target, they ensure that that particular target is completely wiped out. It is decimated. We'll have to see how Lebanon actually responds to this tit-for-tat war between Israel and Hezbollah.
Well, thank you for that, Akanksha. Ambassador Rajiv Dogra is also with us here in the studio. Ambassador Rajiv Dogra, thank you for your time and thank you for being with us in our continuous coverage. I know it's a long day for you too, but dynamics are changing by the hour. Suddenly, Donald Trump, the Americans and the Israelis are also realizing that this is costing them a lot. You know, a few F-16s downed is a few $100 million, if not close to $1 billion, gone down. And that too via friendly fire. So they don't seem to have gamed this properly. The Iranians on the other side are saying, listen, we will make the cost of war dear as long as you drag this on because we know how to fight long wars.
Well, exactly. In fact, Trump was advised by his army chief of staff that do not get into it. This is going to cost us heavy. But Trump didn't care because there was a sword of Epstein hanging over him. And there was Netanyahu, who for his own reasons wanted this war.
Right.
Plus, Saudi Arabia was egging him on. Now, chickens have come home to roost. And they have come home to roost in a very bad way. Because, let me give you just one example. Since yesterday, people were wondering why is Iran concentrating on wiping out the American bases in Gulf countries. There's a method to that. Because if those bases are wiped out or made non-functional, then American ships can't be serviced. Nor can American fighter aircrafts get servicing and refueling arrangements in those bases. So Iran has done it very cleverly. The consequences are that American radar facilities on those bases will not be able to give the coverage that American forces may want.
Correct.
The second thing is, Israel thought it was impregnable. Israel's confidence has been badly wounded, badly tested, and Iranian missiles are having relatively free passage, even compared to the last time. That is why Israel is now diverting attention to Hezbollah. Hezbollah comparatively are sitting ducks because they don't have that firepower. So I think the fighting is entering a very dangerous phase.
Well, there was a very interesting insight that Tom Cooper got us, and we'll see if he can come back to us in the studio in a bit. The interesting insight was the Iranians have masked their ballistic missiles behind a flood of UAVs. So this is confusing the systems, and then they're also very smartly using their ballistics and SAMs in such a way that there are the old missiles which are coming in, and then there are the UAVs, and by the time the Israeli arrows, Iron Dome and David Sling figure that out, they are firing a new age ballistic missile which has a loop or a curve and wavers its trajectory, and then they are able to break through these. So clearly war gaming is going to happen. A lot of people are going to learn future wars. But one thing is that the nature of war seems to be everybody is fighting from a distance. Nobody is getting too up close to each other. But these loitering munitions, ballistic missile technology, advanced aircrafts and air defense systems, it's all making it long distance standoff wars that we are seeing, and which both sides seem to be ready to drag on. Where is Iran getting its money from? That's another part. Yes, you were saying something. We got more news, but yeah, after your comment.
Your previous session with Tom Cooper was so educative because it brought out in clear relief as to what is happening on ground or air. But to supplement your point, Iranians learnt a lot from the previous confrontation.
Right.
They analyzed, along with Chinese and Russian help, as to what were the weak points in terms of Israeli capabilities to deter their attacks by drones and missiles. And learning from that, they have made themselves invincible in a way.
True.
That is why, as I said earlier, they are almost getting a free passage.
You know, and nations are thinking that let's have good drones and fantastic drones, which are 10, 15,000 in number at all of their military installations. The Iranians seem to have added another zero. And they are looking at these drones as kamikaze drones carrying nearly 50 kilograms of payload. And then they are going there in swarms and dropping it. Dropping them. No, that's what they're doing. And even if we don't tell it to the Pakistanis are already watching how the Iranians are doing it and they're trying to learn. Now, whether they're going to be effective enough or our Akash Tir is far more impregnable than the Israelis right now because we've gamed our enemy, that's a different conversation. But we've got more news coming through. Let's now tell you an inside story of how these fatal attacks by Israel unfolded on the Iranian territory. In June, the attack that lasted days, Israel had successfully located the top leadership through the bodyguard cell phones. Now, this came to the Khamenei's knowledge, but he failed to act nevertheless. This plain oversight led to the precision strikes by Israel, which it had been planning for months. The report we are now mentioning also highlights how different weapons were used to strike the targets. Surprising, when Khamenei was expected to be in hiding, he was at his anything but secret residential compound. Not any underground bunker, not any secret location, but his own residential compound. The supreme leader on and above the ground. Now, this is surprising many, especially when they would have thought that the Khamenei and his close aides would have taken to an underground shelter or a deep bunker and moved away from the perhaps perceived location to another hidden location. Why didn't they do it? That's another question. Or did they underestimate the firepower that was going to be unleashed upon them and the speed and alacrity with which it could happen? Siddhant Mishra joins us with more. Yes, Siddhant.
Well, that's right, Anand. In fact, this piece of information, this story has been published in the New York Times. And according to this story, the lessons were learned last time when during the 12-day war. In fact, many of the Iranian senior officials' phones, the bodyguards' phones, were compromised. And perhaps on the basis of that only, US and Israeli forces conducted strikes in Iran. But nothing changed. In fact, this time around, again, their locations were they were located at the secret residence of Ali Khamenei, and you know, he was expected to be in the hideout or in the bunker, you know, below the ground. But this meeting was happening in broad daylight. Above the ground at the official residence, secret residence of Ali Khamenei. And perhaps there where the intelligence was passed on to Israel and the strikes were conducted. So last time around, there were lessons learned, but you know, those protocols, those measures were not followed this time. And when it was much anticipated that US and Israeli forces could come after Ali Khamenei, you know, he could be assassinated. The build-up was going on from last 15 days, but despite that, no precautions were taken, and perhaps which led to the assassination of Ali Khamenei.
Right, we've got more news coming through. Siddhant, coming back to you in a bit. Saudi Arabia has summoned Iran envoy in the escalating Gulf crisis amid US-Israel attacks. And Siddhant joins us with more. This is obviously Saudi would want to give the Iranians a dressing down. But Iran is going to do what Iran wants to do because Saudi, they believe, were involved along with the Israelis in goading the Americans to act against them and their leader, supreme leader. Siddhant.
Well, that's right. So, in fact, this morning, Anand, we got to know from the release by the UAE government that UAE summoned the Iranian envoy this morning, and now we're getting to know that the Saudi Arabia now has summoned the Iranian envoy, and perhaps in a very strong word, the message is being conveyed. Perhaps the rogue attitude of the Iranian leadership, which is carrying out a missile attack on these Gulf countries, the brotherly Gulf countries, and in a very rogue manner, these missiles, drones are being sent, civilian infrastructure are being targeted. There have been several hits also in these countries. The air defense systems are trying to bring these missiles down, but there have been several hits as well. UAE has in fact ended all its diplomatic ties with Iran. In fact, they have already shut their embassy. This morning they summoned the Iranian envoy. Now we're getting to know that Saudi Arabia has summoned the Iranian envoy.
Thank you for that. Let's try and understand what's happened a short while ago, viewers. And we'll get Ambassador Rajiv Dogra to also explain to us the import, the strategic import of this. Now, what's happened is, I'm just trying to share with you what I learned from Tom. This is Ras Tanura. Now, if you see Ras Tanura, it's not so far away from Bahrain, and this was also bombed by the Iranians. The Iranians are right across, just right across the Persian Gulf, and this distance is not more than, it's actually less than 500 kilometers. So this is what it is. So, and since this is less than 500 kilometers, all right, let me just correct that. This is less than 500 kilometers. These drones, the kamikaze drones across all these stations, they can fire it across this region from anywhere at will. And these drones, they're just GPS coded to this Royal Refinery, and they will fly unobstructed all this way. And it's a swarm. So the air defense systems cannot shoot down all of them. So if they send across 500 drones, even if 300, 400 are shot down, the remaining 100 can cause enough and more damage here. And that's exactly what's happening. The other part, the Saudis have a huge amount of territory to cover. There are also bases here. And for the Iranians, this is low-cost warfare. Comparatively, each Shahid 136 drone is about $20,000. But the SAMs, the interceptors that these people have to fire, that means the Americans, the Saudis have to fire in their defense system, cost at least 5 to 10 times more. That means for every fire, the cost of defense is very, very high. But by firing at the Saudis, what have the Iranians done? Is it because the command now is decentralized, everybody is acting according to the playbook that's been said? That's what Tom was sharing with us. Does this now complicate things for Iran, or does it actually complicate things for the alliance here and this grouping here?
Well, that's the question in everyone's mind, that has Iran opened too many fronts at the same time? Will it be able to have so much of these drones and other stuff that it can carry on indefinitely? Let's say indefinitely, even in terms of 1 week or one fortnight. The other part is whether strategically they will be equal to their opponents, the many opponents. There, I think I'm a little more optimistic of Iran's capabilities, because Iran supported Houthis totally, completely, when they were fighting Saudi Arabia and UAE.
Right.
And Houthis did not bend down, Houthis did not go down. In fact, Saudi and UAE had to withdraw.
Correct. Now, this is another point, sir. The Houthis need not be firing from here. So it's not necessary that the drones have actually come from here. If the proxies in Bahrain and in Qatar have fired this from here. So that's another point, because we don't have the confirmation if the proxies are active in this region. The other thing, if all these countries have got bases, let's just squeeze this a bit, and if I can squeeze this a bit, this is Saudi Arabia, there's Bahrain, there is Qatar, there is the UAE, and then there is Oman. All of them have bases, US air bases. So that means they're all in alliance with the Americans somewhere or the other, or they've been forced. And then there is also Kuwait somewhere here in this in the mix, which is going to reduce the size, and you'll find Kuwait also coming in. Yeah, so there is Kuwait. Kuwait had it downed a few F-16s. That's because the Kuwaiti systems are not talking to the Bahraini ones or talking to the Qatari ones or the Saudi ones, and a joint military operation with the US and this one, they have no clue who's firing at them. They're blind. Now, is this something which they should have gamed, but the Iranians seem to have figured out, and they are using this to confuse the opponents?
That's very important, Anand, because there are a couple of points here. Despite the outward appearances that there's a GCC, Gulf Cooperation Council, and that they meet regularly and have some kind of a cooperation even on the defense matters, the fact is they are deeply suspicious of each other. They have not had the kind of cooperation which you are referring to in defense terms. The second thing, and that is more important, while a Pakistan-type Shia uprising may not have happened in these countries, but the fact is that there is a large Shia population in each of these Gulf countries. They may not come out openly, but who is to rule out the sabotage part of it?
Right.
So, Gulf countries have to consider very carefully before they get on to an open fight.
Abhi, what is also happening is there is a huge traffic pileup of ships here because this place is closed. This is the Strait of Hormuz. So this place is closed. There's no traffic. So there is a pileup here of ships. There is a pileup here of ships. And again, there is a huge buildup that is happening. There will also be slowly ships that will start piling up here because they will not know where to park. So they'll have to pile. This is Pakistan, this region. The Chinese are quietly watching. We have not talked about the Chinese. You have said that China is sharing intel with Iran.
Absolutely.
Iran plus China intel. Now this is similar to Operation Sindoor, where China was sharing intel with the Pakistanis. Now, the Americans will be watching this. What happens? Will China and Russia actively get into this game?
Well, China and Russia may not jump into an actual war, but China, even before the war started, had sent a huge amount of airborne supplies to Iran.
Okay.
And right from that stage, China had been helping with intelligence information. Not just satellite information, I think there were other means also which China was supporting. Russia has issues of its own in Ukraine, so it may not actively actually get involved in the war because it was depending on Iran to supply it drones. But Russia has given other facilities to Iran, including, I think, some satellite information.
Right.
The other question which we have to ponder about is that if Saudi Arabia, for some reason or the other, decides to join the war, then please remember, there's a Saudi Arabia and Pakistan pact. Will Pakistan jump in openly? Pakistan is already allowing USA to use its airspace and soil to attack Iran.
Yeah, but what are the Pakistanis going to do? Pakistan, because Pakistan has issued a statement. Beg your pardon, I'll just clean that up. Pak has issued a statement in favor of the Iranians. They have in favor of the Iranians, but they have, like you said, pact with SA, pact with Saudi Arabia, Republic of Saudi Arabia, plus Pak. Okay, and then Pak is also saying pact with Iran. So what do the Pakistanis do now? And then they are giving bases to US. Bases are here, Karachi, everywhere they are giving bases to the US. So what happens in this regional dynamic? What does this pesky neighbor of ours do?
Pakistan, meaning Shehbaz Sharif's statement yesterday,
yeah,
the timing was interesting because it happened after Pakistani forces and US Marines killed a number of Pakistani Shias.
Right.
So that was to cover its base domestically.
Right.
But the physical fact is that Shehbaz Sharif is just a puppet.
Right.
He does not count for anything. And his statement was not taken seriously by Iran.
No.
Iran knows that Pakistan is giving airspace and its bases to USA. That is why Iran had also...
Did he say to calm the Shia population in his country down because they were going berserk on the streets?
Exactly, that's what I said for domestic purposes. But Shia population in Pakistan is already alienated and they are significant in numbers. They have been discriminated against politically, economically, in every sense. Not as badly as Hindus and Christians who were decimated, but they are discriminated against. So, Pakistani establishment is now getting restive that what if there are terror attacks by some of the Shia elements.
And then if you look at Afghanistan, Herat and all these regions, they have a connection with the Iranians. There is a sizable Baluch population in Persia, viewers. They will also want to assert themselves. So what's going to happen in this region is a big question. There is trouble even closer home for us in Jammu and Kashmir, where there has been trouble in Srinagar that's been reported. But we'll move to other news that's just coming through. The United States, Bahrain, Jordan, Kuwait, Qatar, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have issued a joint statement, and they strongly condemn the Islamic Republic of Iran's indiscriminate and reckless missile and drone attacks against sovereign territories across the region. They have warned Iran against escalating the conflict further. Akanksha now joins us. Are they going to just stop at a warning, or does this mean that these nations who are often at loggerheads with each other, involved in proxy battles with each other in Africa and also in this region, may now just combine ranks against the Shia nation of Iran?
Right, that's a very key question. How will the US allies in the Middle East now choose to respond? Will they play mute spectators, as there are civilians which are getting targeted, even though many are claiming that the actual targets are US assets and not civilian targets? But eventually the kind of collateral damage that we are seeing play out, whether it is in Kuwait, UAE, Jordan, Bahrain, they are all bearing the brunt of this, because remember, you're looking at various civilian locations, especially the airports getting targeted, Anand, and that is of course going to also impact the inflow of tourists and expats. But more importantly, they've all joined hands with the US, because this statement that you have just put out there has been put out there by the US State Department, which has in fact condemned this. They are saying that we are calling for diplomacy, we are calling for negotiations, and we will not take any killing or targeting of the civilians or the military assets. We'll have to see if these US allies are going to respond or not.
Right. Thank you for that, Akanksha. We got more news coming through, so stay on. We'll come back to you. Rafal Grossi, head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, has said that there is no indication so far that Iran's nuclear installations have been hit or damaged amid ongoing military tensions. Grossi added that radiation levels remain normal, with no elevation detected in countries bordering Iran. However, he warned that the situation is very concerning, cautioning that a potential radiological release cannot be ruled out, a scenario that could force evacuations on a scale of major cities. Akanksha now joins us more. He's saying all is well as of now, but it need not necessarily be so if this continues.
You know, he's also gone on to say that efforts to contact the Iranian nuclear regulatory authorities continue with no response, and that is the vexing part of this, Anand, because we all know that Rafal Grossi was also sharing inputs with regards to the Iranian nuclear missile program. Their software, Mosaic, was the one that was providing Israel with a very crucial intelligence input before they conducted the June strikes last year. So it seems like Iran is also feeling extremely betrayed, because this is the second time around that they have been attacked, that too when peace talks are concerned. But to come back to the point and the breaking inputs that are coming in, the IAEA chief in fact ruling out any sort of radiological release over here, but he's also warned that this is a very fragile situation. They do not know that because the possibility of a nuclear release still remains. But he's at the same time also gone on to indicate that they have no evidence to back back the claims that any of Iran's nuclear installations have been damaged. For how long? Because remember, the US president has already established that they will meet all their objectives. One objective is to destroy and decimate all of Iran's nuclear facilities. So for how long is Iran going to be safe?
But the civilian nuclear facility, is that also now part of this entire operation, or will they leave that aside? That's the other question. David Collier, investigation journalist, with us at this point. David, thank you for joining us here at CNN News 18. Your assessment of how things are developing at this point, because we had President Trump not so long ago that things are happening faster than they expected. But in the last few hours, Iran's drone warfare, their UAVs and their ballistic missiles, seem to have pushed the Americans and the Israeli back a bit.
I mean, there's not any doubt or illusion here that Iran has, over the years, managed to collect a large number of offensive weapons. We knew that this was the case. In fact, part of it is it just shows us that appeasement doesn't work. These conversations and these deliberations have been going on now for not years, but decades. And all the time, Iran has been building up this military arsenal. So it's a surprise that they have it. The question is, how deep do their reserves? The Americans obviously believe that this intensity of Iran striking out at all of it, all at once, cannot carry on for long, which is probably why the messages from the US appear to be suggesting this is going to last possibly weeks, but not much longer than that.
But increasingly, what do you believe will be America's priority? To dismantle their ballistics missile program or to dismantle the regime?
Well, look, Trump has obviously set a very high bar. I mean, the initial comments have been regime. So, look, neither of us have all of the information to our hands here. All we can do is we can watch what is taking place and we can try to build an assessment. The Americans obviously believe that the anti-regime feeling on the street in Iran is obviously quite large, because that's what this is going to be about. You're not going to be able to bring down the regime with military power from the outside. You can do it down, you can weaken it. And I would imagine that what the Americans and the Israelis here is that by doing that, they will embolden and empower the people on the street to rise up and change the regime.
But do you see that happening? Do you see that happening? Do you believe that there is enough traction on ground for the people to take over? Raza Pahlavi and President Trump have repeatedly exalted the people to come back onto the streets. But is that really happening?
Well, this is the question. I mean, firstly, you can't expect people to come up on the streets when there are airplanes in the air bombing the buildings on the ground. So the first hit is certainly about weakening that regime, making them look vulnerable. Strikes, for example, like the assassination of the Ayatollah, are going to send a message to these people that, you know, the Americans can do this, but they need your help. So the first period, what we're going to see is American power trying to dismantle and weaken the regime and make them look vulnerable. Then the question becomes, is it there? Look, history is going to show us. It's going to unfold one way or another. I truly hope, because look, Iran has been feeding poison into the entire region for decades. What we've seen from Hezbollah, what's going on in the Houthis, this jihadist angle that they created, using Syria as a funnel system to destabilize Lebanon. This is what Iran has been doing for decades. So we can hope that this is the case, that the American power will bring up the street, and the street will actually change the regime. Whether it's going to happen or not, I really cannot tell you.
But Iran's proxies, and Iran also seems to be fighting a low-cost war, and also they are trying to bring the Americans and the Israelis to play to their strengths rather than the other way around, because the mix of UAVs and ballistic missiles seems to be befuddling the defense systems that the Americans and the Israelis have put together in this region.
Well, look, firstly, we have to accept that no system is perfect. You cannot stop all of these missiles coming through, and there are various means to try to get the weapons through. There are also different distances between, for example, Israel is further away than some of the Gulf states, so they have more time to react. Look, nothing is hermetically sealed. There will be some missiles getting through, but I still believe that the amount of weaponry that the Iranians are firing and the smaller amount that's getting through suggests that Iran cannot keep up this intensity for very long. It just can't. It does not have the reserves to be throwing hundreds of missiles, all of their neighbors, consistently for a long period of time. At some point, the Iranian reserves here of the bigger weapons, the more dangerous weapons, are going to start.
True. David, just stay on with us. Ambassador Rajiv Dogra is also with us, and he's getting a flurry of videos and new information, which he's very curiously been trying to scroll and have a look at. What is it that you are getting, Ambassador Rajiv Dogra? We got news coming through. I'll come back to you, sir. We'll take this and then get your views on. The Saudi Ministry of Energy has announced that a limited fire at the Ras Tanura refinery of Saudi Aramco is under control and has had no impact on oil supply. So, was this nothing but a smoke screen, just an impact then? So that's the story. Akanksha now joins us with more. Yes, Akanksha.
Right, and that indeed is going to be a sigh of relief for all of these OPEC plus nations, because remember, Anand, they have vowed to increase their overall oil output by 35%. They are currently producing over 550,000 barrels per day, but this Ras Tanura facility had to be shut down soon after that attack was happening. And in fact, after that attack, they were saying that this is also going to, it's a very key critical oil refinery which could have impacted the output. But right now, that statement coming out from the Saudi Oil Ministry goes on to say that this is perhaps a temporary shutdown, and they will be resuming operations very soon and will not sort of impact the overall output of the oil production. But remember, it's not the first time that Aramco has witnessed such an attack. It was in September of 2019 also, and Aramco happens to be one of the heavily fortified oil refineries. And so,
well, one thing, Akanksha, I've got limited time. I just want to get a quick comment from Ambassador Rajiv Dogra also, that these pictures also show it's not fuel, because then the smoke would have been, plumes of smoke would have been black. This seems to be a lot of dust, explosion. Of course, there is fire. Some amount of fuel maybe, but not large amounts of fuel. Ambassador Rajiv Dogra. Yeah.
Exactly. As anyone who has seen a large refinery, including those in India, they have these automatic cutoffs that even if one part, and oil is hugely inflammable, still, even if one part is struck, then the others are not damaged or not put under fire. So it's quite possible that the fire may have been contained, as the energy minister has said, but he's also cleverly said that the overall oil supply is not affected. Oil supply from this refinery may be affected, but not the overall.
And this is not a small blast. There is a significant impact at the Ras Tanura refinery, but it's not that the entire refinery has gone up in smoke, because large portions of it seem to be unaffected. There is a particular section which has suffered huge amounts of damage, but the overall oil supply does not remains not disrupted. How they word it beautifully and how they try and ensure that what is important is put out. I must also tell our viewers that there is a clear stoppage on any kind of footage to be released on social media by civilians, and this seems to have been announced not just in the UAE but across the region there. And in the UAE, in fact, they have announced that there will be imprisonment for up to 1 year if video footage or any footage is uploaded on social media by locals without approval or sanction from the government. They've actually said you can't put out anything that's coming out or whatever is happening around there. So the state is actually trying to control the dissemination of information. And this is happening over in Iran, in Israel, everywhere. It's happening. And it happens when you're in a state of war. We're going to take a short break. Stay with us.
That's exactly the point that we've also been discussing, and Tom was also saying that the target is meant to be these US assets in these ally countries, but because these are densely populated areas, they are inadvertently hitting civilian targets, because if civilians were indeed the target, the casualties could have been in hundreds.
That is, to use the American terminology, collateral damage.
Right, right. Lieutenant General D.P. Pandey, the sheer escalatory nature of this, as Ambassador Dogra was also highlighting, they've gone on to ask for Germany's help. They're also trying to involve France over here, because, say, UK has already reacted. In fact, Sir Keir Starmer also spoke about their fleet being involved. But if NATO were to get involved, what is the end game of this war? If NATO and these Middle Eastern US allies were to get involved, what happens?
So look, while
and
I
Iran
think,
has already indicated that they are not looking towards any negotiations now.
Yeah, Kanchal, it's too early for Iranians to talk about negotiations. It's just, again, this is something, not a war which is being fought between two street people. That also goes for a very long time. We are fighting a war with two military powers and two nations and two ideologies which are totally disparate and different. And it's about survival of Iranian regime's thought process, which is absolutely contrarian to this thing. While the Gulf states have already changed their thought process and they have aligned to the Western ideology to a great extent, but Iranians are totally polar opposite and they have never changed their views for the last about 45, 50 years. They remain where they remain. So to believe that it's going to just crumble, IRGC is not just not a slap dog onto a street that they can wish away. They will fight, they will control, and this will go on for some time. But I just want to add both the countries, the Israelis and Americans, and a lot of time people are saying that Trump has put Israel first this time. I don't think so. I think it's a war of Americans with Iran, and it is something to do with the Chinese. It is just not about Iran itself.
Yes,
so
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, so I think I told last time also on your this thing on your channel, but American immediate political objective is to change the strategic orientation of Iran. They should give up the ballistic missile systems, and because that was threat not only to America but more importantly to Gulf states eventually. So if you recall, while Saudi Crown Prince has said about a month back they will not allow their own airspace and ground to be attacked for Iran, but the fact of the matter is
Back live with our coverage on the fury in the Gulf. David Collier with us, Ambassador Rajiv Dogra with us, and let's ask them this. How did the Israelis and the Americans get so much intelligence, that to ground intelligence, unless there is a mole within, very, very higher up within the entire Iranian regime, David? You are the investigation journalist, so tell us.
And this is not a mole. We're talking about a regime that has millions of people inside the country who are opposed to the regime.
I'm just going to ask for some fallback audio in the studio so our Ambassador Rajiv Dogra can also hear you. Yes, go ahead, David. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, we saw, for example, in the conflict with Hezbollah, where the Israelis managed with the beepers to supply the Hezbollah, communication network that started exploding on them. The Israeli, I would say, informants in Iran are many everywhere. This is effectively how the Americans and the Israelis have done it.
Your thoughts?
Well, I think it works both ways. Yes, of course, Mossad claims it has a considerable network, and all the actions by Israel and Iran over the last couple of years point to that fact. There have been some very, very daring and adventurous attacks by Israel in Iran. So it cannot happen without having human hint. But on the other hand, Iran must also have some Palestinian moles within Israel. That is why, besides the satellite intelligence that China is providing, it has reasonably accurate information about where the Israeli generals are meeting, because there's a report that one attack took place on that particular meeting. So it works both ways, and it's also a lesson for India that we may have good information all through, we have excellent agencies, but there is need in this present day world to have 100% accuracy.
Yes, and to have precision hitting like the BrahMos did, that this is not something that both the Iranians and the Israelis have been able to do, and neither of their air defense systems are impenetrable. The Israelis are now seeing that their three-way defense system that has arrows, that's got David Sling and also the Iron Dome, it's quite vulnerable because there have been a lot of hits that have happened. Meanwhile, drone hit the British military base in Cyprus, and locals and UK officials are confirming this, that there has been a hit at the British military base in Cyprus. So clearly this after the UK came out and said that they will offer logistical help to the Americans. Sanjay Suri is joining us live. Sanjay, you were in Beit Shemesh. What did you see? There is a lot of debris, 9 people killed, many injured. That death toll could go up. It was a civilian area not far away from an Israeli military installation. But where are you now? And are those projectiles still flying in the skies? Is the Israeli defense, air defense, working well? Sanjay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Yes, I'm here back in Tel Aviv. And Beit Shemesh was, of course, a tragic incident. This was a direct hit on a synagogue. We are told that there is a military base close by. Well, there's a military base close by to almost any place in Israel, depending upon how close you measure close. So we do not know whether this was intended, whether this was a miss-hit, whether it was aimed at a synagogue. What is certain is that in one attack after another, the famed Israeli defense system is not quite working in as foolproof a way as a lot of us had imagined it would. So there are chinks in the defense, and the Iranian missiles are getting through. We heard a lot of threats from very senior Iranian leaders that they would be able to penetrate these defenses, and we were not certain whether that was due rhetoric or whether there was some substance to it. But this is just now the very start of this. This is going to go on for weeks, if not longer. If this is the kind of penetration that Iran is able to manage, and they have said that they're holding on to their yet more devastating missiles, then certainly Israel can see yet more hits than it has so far.
Well, they've just launched, issued a warning, the Iranians sometime back. Tom Cooper is back with us in the studio. You stay safe, Sanjay Suri. Did you see that warning where the Iranians have warned Israelis to stay away from civilian areas near military installations? They have said, if you know your military installations, stay away from them because we are launching our superior ballistic missiles. Now, we got more news coming through. Amazon's AWS has temporarily cut power at a UAE data center after an unidentified object struck an availability zone, causing a fire and brief service. Now, so supply chains are now being hit, or there are corporates who are getting involved. Akanksha joins us with more. Yes, Akanksha.
So you hit the nail on the head, Anand. They're saying that their availability right now and perhaps their services are going to bear the impact of this, as we are being told. And at roughly 4:30 a.m. is what the local time that's being reported so far of this entire attack was. This was the Amazon data center in the UAE. So UAE, as you can see, is bearing the maximum brunt of this. It also happens to be one of the key sort of hubs for commerce and trade, and we'll have to see how they will be able to go ahead and even protect their supply chains right now. It's in fact caused a fire, even a halt to the services at the moment. So we'll have to see how much time will Amazon take to actually even resurrect this data center. But at around 4:30 a.m. PST is what we're being told.
Right. Thank you for that. Tom Cooper and Ambassador Rajiv Dogra were discussing something between themselves. What was it?
Yes, we are discussing latest calculations regarding the number of remaining interceptors missiles in US and Israeli arsenals. And if Iranians continue like this for 2 or 3 days, the Americans and Israelis are going to run out of
Interceptors.
anti-ballistic missile interceptors, yes.
So what's the way that they can actually counter the UAVs so that they can save the interceptors for the ballistics? Because what you said, and please explain it to our viewers, is that they are hiding the ballistics behind the new ones and the more potent ones, behind the old ones and the UAVs.
If you permit me to move over
please,
to
please,
the map.
please. You don't need permission. It's all
It's
yours.
easier to explain.
Yeah.
Look, so far we have primarily seen strikes on targets in northern and western Iran.
Okay.
So up to Tehran, to
Okay.
this line, and down to Bandar Abbas.
You want the pencil? Yeah,
No,
go ahead.
It's okay, don't worry.
Yeah.
We haven't seen any kind of strikes, at least I haven't seen any kind of strikes up on targets in central and eastern Iran. And this is where Iranians are hiding their heaviest, longest ranged weaponry. It means they can still shoot over at Israel as they like. That is the point. So unless they find a way to destroy these missiles before they are launched, there is going to be a problem. We have seen last night and this morning there were reports about US B-2 bombers using bunker buster bombs, and B-52s even using bunker buster bombs to destroy some of these so-called missile cities. And this is precisely because of that. They are trying to destroy these underground facilities. Problem is now the following. Bunker busters, this is a so-called BLU 109 warhead. They were penetrating specific depth, 50, 60 meters. And the Iranians began constructing their underground missile cities a few years after they have entered service in the United States, precisely below that depth.
Precisely below the depth. But so they'll have to have not 1, 2, but 3 bunker busters, one after the other, to have any impact below 60 meters. If it is, let's say, 100 meters, 120 meters down.
Depends on the hill above.
And then they'll also have a concrete layer that will have to be busted. So that's not going to be easy to do. Yes, Ambassador Rajiv Dogra?
You know, I'm thinking from the Indian viewpoint, because interception and interceptors, there is the result which is before our eyes. Israel, the report said, was trying to sell Iron Dome and Iron Beam to us. Iron Dome, as both of you have explained very well, has not acted the way it should have acted. But what about the Iron Beam?
That is the point. Iron Dome is actually a short-range system. It's designed to intercept short-range artillery rockets, mortars, and artillery shells. Iron Beam would be a longer-range system.
But Iron Beam is very cost-effective, and it's laser, if I'm not mistaken.
The Iron Beam? Or
Iron Beam. Iron Beam.
I don't have the details now by heart, but it could be, yes, that it is laser guided. Yes.
The larger question is, the Israelis, the Americans don't seem to have a solution for the kamikaze drones.
No.
A cheaper, more effective. Because a kamikaze drone somewhere is just around $20,000.
This is now the paradox in this situation. Excuse me to interrupt. The problem is this. The Iranians are releasing lots of UAVs in direction of Israel as well. And most of US efforts in this regards are concentrating on defending Israel.
Right.
But they are not protecting all of their allies in the Persian Gulf, or very little in comparison to Israel.
Right.
Because you can be certain that the Americans have their combat air patrols use.
What we're going to do is, Tom, we're going to come back to this conversation. I'm compelled we're coming to the top of the hour, so we're going to close this conversation for the moment, but it continues on the other side. Stay with us.
That's exactly the point that we've also been discussing, and Tom was also saying that the target is meant to be these US assets in these ally countries, but because these are densely populated areas, they are inadvertently hitting civilian targets, because if civilians were indeed the target, the casualties could have been in hundreds.
That is, to use the American terminology, collateral damage.
Right. Lieutenant General D.P. Pandey, the sheer escalatory nature of this, as Ambassador Dogra was also highlighting, they've gone on to ask for Germany's help. They're also trying to involve France over here, because, say, UK has already reacted. In fact, Sir Keir Starmer also spoke about their fleet being involved. But if NATO were to get involved, what is the end game of this war? If NATO and these Middle Eastern US allies were to get involved, what happens?
So look, while
and
I
Iran
think,
has already indicated that they are not looking towards any negotiations now.
Yeah, Kanchal, it's too early for Iranians to talk about negotiations. It's just, again, this is something not what's being fought between two street people. That also goes for a very long time. We are fighting a war with two military powers and two nations and two ideologies which are totally disparate and different. And it's about survival of Iranian regime's thought process, which is absolutely contrarian to this thing. While the Gulf states have already changed their thought process and they have aligned to the Western ideology to a great extent, but Iranians are totally pole opposite and they have never changed their views for the last about 45, 50 years. They remain where they remain. So to believe that it's going to just crumble, IRGC is not just not a slap dog onto a street that they can wish away. They will fight, they will control, and this will go on for some time. But I just want to add both the countries, the Israelis and Americans, and a lot of time people are saying that Trump has put Israel first this time. I don't think so. I think it's a war of Americans with Iran, and it is something to do with the Chinese. It is just not about Iran itself.
Yes,
so
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, so I think I told last time also on your this thing, on your.
Viewers, the rolling coverage. The war is widening, it is deepening. And I can tell you, viewers, that there is a palpable sense of unease amongst US allies. They don't quite know what to do now. They didn't expect this. Iran has completely changed and opened the theater. It is using unconventional sources. It is using all sorts of other proxies. It is also using a number of its drones to harry some of the US's allies. It is punishing these allies for standing with Trump. It is punishing these allies for providing bases to America. It is punishing these allies, viewers, for siding with what Iran says is the great Satan. Trump was thinking that he would get an off-ramp, that by decapitating the Iranian regime, he thought that he could go back to the American public and say, look, I have achieved what no other US president could have achieved. Unfortunately for him, the Iranians, though degraded, though decapitated, are in no mood at this point in time, are in no mood to throw in the towel. They're digging deep, their backs are to the wall, and they're beginning to start a very calibrated response. Whether it will add up too much, I can't say, viewers. But clearly, it is upsetting the timelines that America perhaps had set for itself, and even Israel. They were thinking this is going to be a quick in and out. We'll soften up the Iranian leadership. We'll knock out enough of them. Of course, we have Tom Cooper with us. We have Mr. Dogra with us. These are one of, the world's and India's top analysts. We're going to break down this story, but viewers, the defining visual came this morning, and I'm going to show you that defining visual. You remember what Trump said about Operation Sindoor? He said when India lost Rafale, we lost the war. That's what he said, viewers, if you remember that. He said it not once, but he said it several times, and he made those gestures. This is karma coming back, viewers, to bite Trump. This is what happened. An American jet coming down, friendly fire. And guess what, viewers? Authorities in the UAE are now saying there could have been multiple fighter jets. So he was getting great kicks, Trump was, when a few Rafales allegedly went down. Now, viewers, his pilots are bailing out. His jets are hitting the ground. Will Trump come out saying that I've lost the war? No, viewers. This is the problem with reckless commentary from reckless leaders. They don't know their red lines. And what we are seeing, viewers, is this F-15 hit by friendly fire. Tom, what happened here? What do you think happened? Come and talk about this. Let's talk about it. Look at this death spin. It's going slowly. It's floating almost. Come to me. Come to me. This is an interesting visual because this was the least expected. This is happening over Kuwait, I think.
There is another video showing the hit, actually. So the missiles scored a direct hit somewhere in the rear of the aircraft. blew up both engines. So they're both afire, and the control surfaces are out of control. So that means that the control lines in the aircraft are out. The pilot cannot steer the aircraft anymore. So everything that was left for the pilot and his weapon systems officer in the rear was to eject, and one of them is visible on the video. This was an F-15E. You can see this by targeting navigation pods visible under the intakes. Not clearly visible, but they're there. Otherwise, there wouldn't be these bulges visible on the video. What happened? The problem is this US jet was probably involved in intercepting UAVs, low-flying UAVs. But due to miscoordination with the Kuwaitis, their identification friend and foe systems were not synchronized. And therefore, the Kuwaitis did not recognize this US Air Force F-15E as friendly. They have opened fire and shot it down.
So this is someone bungling the chain of command. You're saying this is what happened. How does this happen?
This is the following. They didn't expect Kuwait to be dragged into this war. Whether Kuwait, nor United Arab Emirates, nor Bahrain, or whoever else. Therefore, they didn't care to coordinate with the Kuwaitis on time. And now they have to make do with whatever they have to improvise. And in this case, this proved nearly deadly for this crew.
Nearly deadly. And the crew came down. We're going to just show you those pictures of the two pilots ejecting, and one of them then was shown sequestered. Those are the parachutes opening, and they've come all the way down. And one of them was sequestered in the back of a car. And we have pictures of that also. He's sitting in the back of the boot of the car. And basically, viewers, everyone else has formed a circle around him and saying, keep back, keep back. Because viewers, as you know, America is not very liked. Kuwait's leadership might be in alliance with the Americans, but the public reaction is different on the ground. The public in these Muslim Arab countries, they may see Iran as an adversary, as a civilizational adversary, or call it what you want to, or even a recent adversary. But still, there is a larger concept of Muslim brotherhood, and American pilots hitting the ground, they're not going to be treated well. So luckily for him, viewers, he fell on friendly soil. He fell in Kuwait. And there were enough people to quickly come and form a circle and keep him okay. We don't know what the situation is with the other one because we don't have those pictures. But there you can see him in the back of that car. You can see him there. He is there, and there are a lot of people talking.
This is his sleeve?
Yes.
With the flag, probably.
That's right.
Or unit in Zion.
Yeah. Can we pull out these pictures a little bit? Can we pull back so that they're not so blurred? Because we just want to get it. That's his face. You can see his face. Now, viewers, this was one visual, but we're being told, and there's a lot of chatter, and I don't know how accurate it is, but I'm just bringing it out to you because there is talk that perhaps some American bases are facing some amount of pressure. Now, I don't know if they've been hit. Some people are speculating that there have been hits on US bases. What are you hearing, Tom, from your larger ecosystem?
There have been hits.
There have been hits.
On almost all the US bases in the Persian,
so let's pull out the map.
Let's
pull out the map. Yeah, let's pull it out. I want Tom to go over this map, and let's talk about which are these bases which are finding it a little difficult, or they're facing the heat. Yeah.
Indeed, the newest report is that the Incirlik air base outside of Adana in Turkey.
That's in Turkey. Can we go to the map that shows?
To go over here.
Okay, let's go to this map. There we are. Let's come in closer.
Just a second.
Yeah. There we go. This is one Cyprus, and that's, yeah, we'll just...
waiting for it to open.
There. Okay, there we go. Yeah. Okay, we've also got it on the wall, by the way.
Incirlik is here near Adana.
Okay.
In southern Turkey.
Right.
This is a NATO base with nuclear weapon storage facility.
Wow.
So 20-something nukes are usually
and
held
is that
over
is that the reason why the IAEA has just come out with a statement saying that, look, we've got to be very, very careful? That statement we've been reporting over the last 10, 15 minutes.
Probably.
Because this is Adana, and you're saying that this is where?
This is a nuclear weapon storage facility.
Nuclear weapon storage facility.
Yes, the NATO is holding his so-called nuclear warheads for which there is a dual key arrangement, which means these weapons can be used by Turkish Air Force in the case of a nuclear attack on NATO. So, nearby, and there were reports about this already yesterday, there is Akrotiri Air Base. I think this is here somewhere on Cyprus. This is a British base on Cyprus. That there were also that it was narrowly or something like missed by Iranian ballistic missiles, which means Iranians are now. This is not anymore out of control.
So let's come here. How is all this happening? How are these bases being hit? From where is that's Iran there? You can see at the back. How is this happening? Where are they going from, these missiles?
These missiles are coming from Western Iran, not Western Iran. This would be here, Zakoduhov. This is still in Iraq.
Right.
So this area.
Can we?
Just a second.
Can we bring this down? Oh, sorry.
Turn off this.
Yes.
So and then.
Yeah.
Opa. Ah, God.
There we go. Yeah. That's it.
So,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah. So this is where it's coming
from.
They
are hit from here.
Yes.
And this is now particularly characteristic, particularly important, because Israelis are claiming they have destroyed this and that military or missile base. And still, obviously, the Iranians have the ability to fire shorter-ranged ballistic missiles at bases in the Dana area and in Cyprus area.
Yes.
So this is very important. Why? Because it means they are not knocked out yet. Also, the fact that we have seen UAVs flying over Shiraz and Tehran, but no combat aircraft of either the US Air Force or US Navy or Israeli Air Force, means they are still limited to operating just UAVs over, for example, Tehran and Esfahan. So this means they are not flying their jets much deeper over Iran.
Let's just connect with Jonathan Conricus, who was the former IDF spokesperson. Let's go straight across to him. Thank you very much, Jonathan, for speaking to us. I want to talk to you a little bit about the end game, so to speak. Are we in that phase where we are moving towards an end game? Has this war and the Iranian resistance surprised Israel and the United States? What are you seeing from Israel's perspective, sir?
Yes, hello again. I think to speak about endgame after less than two days of war, it's a bit premature. But I think we could conservatively say that things are perhaps moving in the right direction. Moving in the right direction in the terms of the fact that the former so-called supreme leader and 40 of his senior military and political advisors and commanders are no longer going to oppress the Iranian people. That's a good thing. From the fact that Israel has full freedom of action in Iranian skies, including over Tehran and any location where we need to strike targets. The IDF just announced that it has dropped more than 100 pieces of ordnance from fixed-wing aircraft in various places of Iran, including Tehran. That announcement came out a few hours ago. You perhaps missed it in studio. But I'd say that the surprising part, there are a few things that are surprising here in terms of Iran and the environment. One, the relatively limited amount of ballistic missiles that the Iranians managed to fire. We anticipated more. We were bracing ourselves for salvos of dozens of missiles simultaneously and hundreds of missiles per day. And I'm very happy to say that we are far from that. We still have to investigate what the reason is. Maybe they are conserving their firepower, or maybe they're not able to fire because Israel and the US have struck many of their missile launchers and they're struggling to fire. I am also surprised by Iran's strategy to kill civilians all across the Middle East. I think it's a strategy that it's not going to be very beneficial for them. Killing civilians in Israel is not a surprise and it's not a new thing. That's what the Iranian regime does. But killing Arab Muslims in Qatar, in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait, firing at Jordan, that's a very odd choice of strategy for the Iranians, one that I think will eventually backfire. So summing this up, I think good early progress from let's say the representatives of the brave free world against this oppressive regime, but we are far, far from anywhere near a finish line or anywhere where we can speak about the concluding or end game.
Very quickly, Colonel Conricus, you said that this would backfire, this strategy of targeting other Gulf nations. In what way will it backfire on Iran? What is expected to happen?
Yeah, I assume that what the Iranian regime expected was that by firing at various countries in the region, they would, in their weakness, cower before the Iranians and apply pressure on America in order to stop the war. That doesn't seem to be the case. And what the Gulf nations have said, joint statement by the GCC ministers and also other communiques from the UAE and from Saudi is, well, we don't like being fired at, we don't like our civilians being targeted. This is blatant aggression from Iran, and we reserve the right, and we actually are now thinking about actually defending ourselves, which is, far below what I would expect any sovereign country to do when fired upon. When somebody fires at you, you retaliate. That's how you keep yourself safe, but at least they're moving into that direction. Iran is running out of strategic support, and by its own action, by its own aggression, is now finding itself quite alone. Russia, which I'm sure the Iranians wanted and thought would come to their help, really isn't. Russia is busy trying to occupy Ukraine and is suffering from its own endeavors and misfortunes, military ones. China seems not to be interested enough in order to jeopardize their own interest. And I'm quite sure that there's some behind-the-scenes deal that has been made between the US and China regarding export of oil in order to compensate for what the Chinese were buying illicitly from Iran before that. And currently, Iran, by its actions, by its aggression, they find themselves quite alone, and they are deepening their isolation by their actions. Doesn't look to be a very smart move, and all the charming and all the diplomatic rhetoric and all the propaganda that they'll be able to spin out won't undo that reality.
But the idea was to force, the idea of the preemptive strikes was to force or soften the Iranian regime enough that it would come back to the table. It's refusing to do so, despite the decapitation strikes, despite 50 or 60 of their top commanders gone, including the Ayatollah, and most of their leadership wiped out. They seem to be hunkering down. Why is this happening?
I don't know what you base the premise of the question on, that was the desired outcome or the intent. I don't think that it was. I think that the intent of this operation is to bring the Iranian regime to its knees and eventually make it so weak so that it can be overthrown by the Iranian people. That, I think, is the desired outcome. If the regime would be smart enough in its instincts of self-preservation to come to the Americans and say, okay, you know what? We won't enrich on Iranian soil. We will immediately stop firing ballistic missiles and producing them. And we will immediately cease in supporting terror organizations and building terror networks around Western Asia. I'm sure that the US would find that quite okay to make a deal and to say, okay, we'll call off the war. I doubt that the Iranian regime will do that because they are filled with hubris, with pride, and it's clouding their judgment. And from an Israeli perspective, what Israel is now pursuing, in my mind, way, way too late in terms of the amount of aggression that we have sustained from the Iranian regime over at least 3 decades. What Israel is doing now is finally returning and taking initiative against the Iranian regime and attacking them because they have been managing an indirect war against Israel and actively pursuing our destruction. And that's the framework. Will the Iranians come to the table and, plead for a ceasefire, capitulation? That will probably save them a lot of effort. I doubt that they will, and judging by what Larijani, last man standing or current man standing, is saying or tweeting, they're not inclined to do so.
Well, Colonel Conricus, what we're also seeing is that some of these Gulf countries that are aligned with America are now going into what is known as lockdown mode, economic lockdown mode. Can they sustain, or will they say, well, maybe if this stretches on a few too many days, we're going to start bleeding economically, the expats that came to work will feel a little uneasy, and perhaps their economic prospects might begin to dim. Is there a possibility that that could change calculations on the ground as far as Israel and America are concerned?
I think the Iranian regime will suffer more bleed more economically and actually than what these countries will, and the amount of damage that the Iranian regime will sustain every day of this war is far more than what these Gulf countries will have to deal with. Granted, these countries are not battle hardened. They do not have the DNA of fighters. They do not have the DNA of resilience. They have the DNA of oil-rich countries that have flourishing financial systems as a result of it, and it's a different culture. But at the end of the day, I think the balance of power here is one where every day that goes by, the Iranian regime will be weakened, its capabilities will be really limited in terms of what they can do. And I don't think that they can play a long and patient waiting game, because at the end of the fighting, there will be the Iranian people. The Iranian people, the moment the bombs stop flying, will, in my assessment, take to the streets and seek to free themselves from the yoke of the Iranian regime and its oppression. So playing a waiting game, not entirely sure that that's a good strategy for the Iranians either.
Colonel Conricus, I have to ask you this, because you said that there has been now air dominance that has been maintained by Israel and the United States. Yet we're seeing bases of the United States in Turkey and in Kirchik, even in Cyprus, where there was an attempt to knock out a British base. There have been obvious strikes on other US bases in the region. We don't quite know the extent of damage that they have sustained. How is this happening? How is Iran being able to sort of strike these targets? And of course, there has also been damage now in a few places in Israel, and we have those pictures in Beit Shemesh and other places. So what is making Iran capable of hitting or counter-reacting in this way?
Yeah, one issue doesn't necessarily have to do with the other. Aerial dominance is a fact. I think it would be very difficult to dispute that Israel and the US enjoy aerial dominance and superiority over Iranian skies. There are no effective air defense systems. The Russian S-300 systems have been taken out of commission long time ago by Israeli jets. Actually, most of them were destroyed in June last year, and the residual capabilities were wiped off by Israel and the US 2 days ago. So that's one thing that we can set aside. Their offensive capabilities, Iran's ability to fire missiles from bunkers, silos, all across Western Iran, mostly Western Iran, that still exists, and they do fire missiles and they dispatch drones from various bases. But every time they fire, those places are mapped by drones and by other aircraft that are currently constantly hovering above Iranian hovering in Iranian airspace. And the moment they fire, they become a target. And what we're seeing now is that the US and Israel are hunting missile launchers, and the sum of it will be that the longer the fighting will go on, based on the aerial dominance that the US and Israel enjoys, Israel and the US will be able to gradually degrade Iranian capabilities more and more. They already started at a weakened position, and they've been able to fire less than what was anticipated. And my assessment is that their capabilities will continue to be degraded more and more until very small or nominal. How long will that take? That's a business of days and weeks, I would assume, until most offensive Iranian capabilities have been dealt with. And maybe that's the despair and panic that we see in Iranian decision making, that they're lashing out, firing at Gulf countries, firing at civilians all across the Middle East, because they are understanding that they have very little time left to fire the missiles that they have.
So a couple of questions before I let you go. What is the timeline that we are looking at here? Could this become a protracted conflict, a battle of attrition? You might have Iran beginning to engage proxies. They could go asymmetric. Those are possibilities. We're already seeing visuals on our screen of how sympathetic in the Muslim world, in Pakistan, for example, elements sympathetic to Iran and its regime there are attacking US consulates. Tomorrow they might start attacking other US allies, and their assets and consulates. So what is the timeline we're looking at?
Yeah, I mean, for you in India, it's definitely not a newsflash to see radical Muslims do crazy things, whether it's in Pakistan or on Indian soil, and that shouldn't come as a surprise. Timeline here, I think neither the US nor Israel want or need or aspire for a protracted conflict. What you can see is high-intensity military operations, aerial operations against the Iranian regime. And as anticipated, Iran's most important proxy organization that they spent 35, 40 years building, Hezbollah in Lebanon, has now joined in the fray. They are now dragging Lebanon into the war at the behest of the Iranian regime. By the way, much to the frustration of the democratically elected government in Lebanon, who are saying that Hezbollah's actions are reckless and are endangering Lebanon, which actually is very correct. And yes, you are right. There's the risk of Iran using other venues, terrorists and other smaller capabilities in order to deflect. But that, I don't think it will make a meaningful strategic impact. And, if we focus on the core issues here, what Israel and the US are doing now is gradually degrading the Iranian regime, its ability to manage, command and control and conduct military operations. And I think within not a very long period of time, those capabilities will be degraded to such an extent that the Iranian people can actually rise up without mortal fear and actually reclaim their country. Iran will try to, use terrorism and use the dirty tricks that they usually do. But that's not news, and both the US and Israel are prepared, battle-hardened for it. There may be surprises. The Hezbollah or other Iranian proxies may get something off and may surprise either of us. I hope that doesn't happen, but that's what happens in war. But we're prepared for that. But the bottom line, when we keep our focus on the big strategic picture here, is that the sand in the hourglass is running in a very clear direction, and it is not one that is in the favor of the Iranian regime.
So I just want you to accommodate a question or two from Tom Cooper, one of the world's leading military historians. He's here with us in our studio. He's a colleague. Tom Cooper, would you like to ask Colonel Conricus a couple of questions on some of the views that he has expressed?
Well, perhaps one would be the question of semantics. I'm curious to hear how comes that when somebody from Lebanon attacks Israel, that is aggression against Israel. When somebody from Syria attacks Israel, that is aggression on Israel. But when Israel attacks somebody else, then that is self-defense, but no aggression.
Attacks Ukraine, that's aggression. And just like when, and the basis for this, for instance, the Iranians have been conducting indirect and direct warfare against Israel for the better part of 30 years. They have fired ballistic missiles at our civilians. They have manned and funded terror organizations that have killed thousands of Israelis over the years and wounded many thousands. And they are openly saying and really trying to destroy the state of Israel. So when Israel takes military action against the Islamic Republic of Iran, it is within that context. You can go back, many years and spot the first act of Iranian aggression against Israel.
I tend to come back to many years ago because it is foremost Israeli historians and journalists who are publishing books, writing about the beginnings of Hezbollah in Lebanon of the 1970s, late 1970s, Murabiton militia before Hezbollah, and they said they came into being. These Israeli historians, Israeli journalists say both of these militias came into being because of Israeli massacres on the Shia population of southern Lebanon. So how do you explain now that Iran has started this war?
I don't really follow your train of thought here, with the connection between Hezbollah and what Israel is, the attack that Israel is
because
doing
the same
together with the US
journalists,
on Iran.
it's very simple, because the same journalists and the same historians say that this is how Israel has started a secret war with Iran back in the early 1980s.
Oh, Israel started.
Yes.
By when militias and terrorists in Lebanon invaded into Israel in the early 1970s, attacked Israeli civilians. Israel responded by striking in Lebanon, and then afterwards Iran built a militia.
May I now use your words from earlier? You said this is a different war because you are now talking about Palestinians, while I'm talking about Shia population of southern Lebanon, which was killed by dozens by Israeli armed forces.
I'm talking about Lebanon.
Yes, and you are talking about Lebanon, but I'm talking about Palestine. You are mixing Palestinians who were operating from Lebanon.
Believe me, I'm not mixing anything.
Yeah, you are very much do. And then there are Shia of southern Lebanon. There are Shia of southern Lebanon who have organized themselves into Murabiton and then the Hezbollah.
You're in the studio, so you have an obvious advantage over me, and we're not going to be able to speak over each other. So I can happy, just if you want to ask a question, I can.
I'm asking you a question.
Answer it, but we can't have a debate because you're in studio.
I'll ask you a question. Why are you mixing Palestinian incursions into Israel of the early 1970s, avoiding to answer the question about Israeli massacres on Shia of southern Lebanon, and then not discussing the emergence of Murabiton and then the Hezbollah, and thus the start of the secret war between Israel and Iran, which was, according to Israeli historians and Israeli journalists, started by Israel.
Yeah, so I think you have it kind of flip side, upside down. The country, the nation state that has built terror organizations and equipped them and deployed them around our borders is Iran. Israel has not deployed any militia or terror organization in Azerbaijan, in Iraq, in Afghanistan or Pakistan.
So southern Lebanese army was also not militia.
One at a time.
Hold on, please.
Yeah, one at a time.
Let me answer. Let me answer. Israel has not done that. The country that has done that is Iran. Iran has a strategy formulated by the former supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, which is to build a ring of fire around Israel, equip different proxies, different useful idiots from the Iranian perspective, Lebanese Hezbollah, Gazan Hamas and Islamic Jihad, various jihadi organizations in Syria before Assad was removed, and various organizations in Iraq, and of course the Houthis in Yemen. The strategy that the Iranians built over the years was to build that ring of fire around Israel and to try to bleed Israel of international cohesion, international support, to weaken it. And then when Hamas attacked Israel on October 7, that was what was supposed to be the opening shot of the last war, the last campaign, the flood of Al-Aqsa against Israel, which is an Iranian strategy, and all of the Iranian proxies were supposed to join in the fight and defeat Israel. So the one that is conducting war is Iran. And Israel is retaliating against that.
So all of that we can discuss at another time. But the fact is, viewers, that the Israelis and the Americans are now quite sure that it's only a matter of time before there is going to be regime change in Iran. And that's the top headline coming out of this interview with Colonel Jonathan Conricus, because they are ready, as they are saying, to degrade the regime to the extent that the popular will of the people will rise up and complete the job. And therefore, they will find liberation. Well, thank you, Colonel Conricus, for speaking with us. As always, it's great to speak with you. Stay safe.
Thank you.
We'll touch base at a later date. Thank you very much. Let me go straight across to Sanjay Suri, who joins me now from Israel. He's been covering this conflict. What's the latest coming out of Israel? We're seeing some pictures, and we also got a report from you from Beit Shemesh, where you were at the site of that synagogue that had been flattened out. What's the general information flow in Israel with regards to other strikes that might have been conducted, if at all? Sanjay.
Rahul, there is some concern within Israel that a lot of the Iranian missiles have been getting through. And that concern was, of course, understandably most keenly and most painfully expressed in Beit Shemesh, which I visited a short while back. And that's where we had the attack on the synagogue that you described. And there were people who were hiding in the shelter, and the shelter itself was blown up. That came a day after the missile that got through and hit Tel Aviv here, and a woman who was in her 40s was killed. Many were injured. An apartment block was almost demolished in that, brought down in that attack. There is some concern that these missiles have been getting through. We know that there has been a pattern in the June war of last year, where there was a rather low volume of missiles fired at first from Iran, and after some time they began to fire more. So at the moment, each is testing the defenses and the capacities of the other. Whether Iran is holding back from firing more, as we just heard, because they simply are holding back to their and strategizing this use, or they have just been degraded and blown up, or they've abandoned ship. We don't know yet, but it's too soon to say that the capacity is over. And this capacity will have a long tail, because if even just one remnant unit fires one missile days after we believe the war has ended, and that enters the airspace in UAE, there can be no plane taking off, and then they'll wait further. So the knock-on effect from these attacks on the economy of the UAE and of these countries is going to be serious, and it's looking long-term, and they are being attacked because Iran sees them as hosting their enemy.
So this is a war by other means, some would say, that is being waged by Iran, because clearly it knows that it's going to be completely knocked out of the skies. So it is using other means. It's using drones, which are relatively cheaper. It might even engage proxies. It could get very, very hot in the Gulf, viewers, for a large number of US allies, as Sanjay Suri has been saying. And one of those is Israel, who is that is being targeted. There's no doubt about the fact that there are now strikes on Israel. And here is a report from Sanjay Suri, sent just about an hour or two back from Beit Shemesh. Let's go straight across to that.
We are here in Beit Shemesh, and this here behind me was a synagogue. Would you believe it? There's no sign of it anymore. Complete devastation, a direct hit by a missile. People sought shelter below the synagogue in a dedicated shelter, and they were all killed. And with me is Ben, who has lived long here. He lives right next door to this. So Ben, were you here when the missile struck?
Yes, I was at my house. I was sleeping. It was around 2:30 p.m. And I wake up by horrific noise, horrific boom, like the most significant shock wave of boom that I heard in my life.
And the people who took shelter here, they of course live here. What kind of work do they do? I mean, do they work for the government, or are they just local civilian people?
No, Beit Shemesh it's a city of normal people, regular people, you know, white collars, blue collars people.
But
yes.
Tell me, the people who died here, they had gone to the synagogue. Underneath the synagogue is a dedicated shelter.
Yes.
They took shelter, they went into the shelter, and
yes.
still they were killed. So a shelter is not necessarily safe.
That's true what you said. The statistics in this case is really, really cruel, because the chance of that is less than 1%, I believe. But the problem, it was a direct hit. Where they went is perfectly fine. They did everything that they could do. They didn't neglect the situation. They didn't disrespect it. They went to the safe place underneath. But the problem, the missile was directly hit.
Yes. So finally, not even a shelter is safe from a direct hit.
Yes, from a direct hit. And people like the military department who responsible on the civil life. It's called Pikuda Oref. They say that if it's a direct hit, it's a big problem. This is a military aircraft jet. It could be F-15, F-16, F-35. That options, especially when you hear this kind of sound, which means it goes really fast. It's not helicopter, it's not something like that. About this incident, from what I've read, the situation is that they're saying they launched the wrong system. Apparently, they launched not the arrow, they launched David Sling, and it wasn't enough to catch it. They launched 2 missiles to catch the flight to catch the missile that was bombed here, but they didn't catch him.
So there was some error in defense as well.
A human error, yeah.
What was here? Can you just describe this place to me?
Yes. So let's say from over here to over there, it was the synagogue. Here you have one private house, as you can see. Here you have another one. Over there you have another one. Over there where you see the I think it's olive tree, there was another house. You don't see any wreckage of it. It depends, the amount of destruction depends on how old is the house. If it's really old, then as like here, you see the differences? The destruction is much more bigger. Here it's more modern house. You can recognize by the Jerusalem stone that cover the house. And it's more endurable to sustain earthquakes, missiles, fires, and so on.
Right.
That's exactly the point that we've also been discussing, and Tom was also saying that the target is meant to be these US assets in these ally countries, but because these are densely populated areas, they are inadvertently hitting civilian targets, because if civilians were indeed the target, the casualties could have been in hundreds.
That is, to use the American terminology, collateral damage.
Right, right. Lieutenant General D.P. Pandey, the sheer escalatory nature of this, as Ambassador Dogra was also highlighting, they've gone on to ask for Germany's help. They're also trying to involve France over here, because, say, UK has already reacted. In fact, Sir Keir Starmer also spoke about their fleet being involved. But if NATO were to get involved, what is the end game of this war? If NATO and these Middle Eastern US allies were to get involved, what happens?
So look, while
and
I
Iran
think,
has already indicated that they are not looking towards any negotiations now.
Yeah, Kanchal, it's too early for Iranians to talk about negotiations. It's just, again, this is something, not a war which is being fought between 2 street people. That also goes for a very long time. We are fighting a war with 2 military powers and 2 nations and 2 ideologies which are totally disparate and different. And it's about survival of Iranian regime's thought process, which is absolutely contrarian to this thing. While the Gulf states have already changed their thought process and they have aligned to the Western ideology to a great extent, but Iranians are totally polar opposite, and they have never changed their views for the last about 45-50 years. They remain where they remain. So to believe that it's going to just crumble, IRGC is not just not a slap dog onto a street that they can wish away. They will fight, they will control, and this will go on for some time. But I just want to add both the countries, the Israelis and Americans, and a lot of time people are saying that Trump has put Israel first this time. I don't think so. I think it's a war of Americans with Iran, and it is something to do with the Chinese. It is just not about Iran itself.
Yes,
so
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, so I think I told last time also on your on your channel, but American immediate political objective is to change the strategic orientation of Iran. They should give up the ballistic missile systems, and because that was threat not only to America but more importantly to Gulf states eventually. So if you recall, while Saudi Crown Prince has said about a month back they will not allow their own airspace and ground to be attack for Iran. But the fact of the matter is that he was the one who went urging, and Trump has said as much, that he came to me and telling this is going to be eventually a challenge. Because when the ballistic missile numbers, which in 2027 they were aiming to make to 8,000, that crosses, and the speed of missile crosses, there was no way Saudis could have protected themselves. So that is one, I think they want to change. The second, they want to change orientation was about the nuclear ambition, with 440 kgs of uranium lying with them for 60% enriched. It was just a matter of time, I think, in a couple of months. Right? The process of integrating, process of weaponizing further takes time, but they would have had the capability to use nuclear weapons. So this was, I think, the Americans wanted, but look at it from the Iranian side. Iran is a sovereign nation. They wanted to have a weapon, nuclear weapons. When Pakistan, which is a terror state, known terror state, can have nuclear weapons and Americans can continue to engage with them, Israel can have in the region, why should not Iran have its own? So I think these were two polarized actions that are taking place, and both have their own mission, and therefore they are both legitimate to fight the war, even at the cost of regional.
Viewers, America might have plunged the Gulf into chaos, and there's big breaking news coming in, and I'm going to go straight across to Aman to get it. Aman, this is very big news that is coming through. We are being told that the Iranian media has made some astonishing claims.
Well, yes, Rahul, what we are learning is that Iran's IRGC is now making a big claim that in the latest missile strike, they have targeted the Prime Minister Netanyahu's compound. They are saying that the Israeli Air Force commander's location has also been targeted in a surprise attack by the IRGC, and they are claiming that Netanyahu's fate is unclear. They are saying that they have carried out a very surprise attack where Netanyahu was, and Netanyahu's future fate is uncertain. Has he survived? Has he not survived? That is the IRGC's claim, big claim coming in today after Israel's big strikes in which Kenamai was taken out.
Well, viewers, there is a lot happening on the ground there. I'm going to bring in Tom Cooper in just a few moments, but I'm going to go straight across to Akanksha also. Let's go straight across to Akanksha. Let's get some news from Akanksha. Akanksha, you're here with us, and I want to come straight out to you. It's a long newsroom, but there is some news breaking about the U.S. Embassy.
So the biggest that we are getting right now is with regards to Netanyahu's office being bombed. This is at least what Iran is claiming, that their IRGC has managed to bomb them. At the same time, Rahul, we must keep in mind that there's already information doing the rounds that Netanyahu has left the country. He's headed either to Greece or Germany. The whereabouts of the Israeli Prime Minister are not known. You know that the British consulate has also been attacked. So Kuwait very much on the radar.
And the US embassy in Kuwait has been shut down because apparently that was also targeted.
Yes, and why just Kuwait? Look at the way Pakistan has in fact been responding. 20 protesters already dead. Their consulate officers over there were retaliating severely. US is currently on tenterhooks because their IRGC is very much digging in their grounds. In fact, there's a warning for the viewers over here. A lot of misinformation doing the rounds as we speak, because there's already viral videos showing how Iranian nuclear sites have been bombed on the other side. There's also a confirmation coming in from IAEA that the Iranian representative has shared information that there is enough damage being done to the Natanz nuclear facility, which means there could be very much risks of radioactive leakage taking place. What is the IAEA going to do about this? How is the UN going to respond? We'll have to see. The next few 48 hours are going to be extremely critical.
So what now we are being told, and I'm going to come into with Aman here, what we are being told, and let's walk through. Aman, what have you got with you?
This is, Rahul, the picture put out by the AFP. This is where the smoke is billowing out very near the US embassy in Kuwait. This is the picture that the AFP has put out and clicked by their own correspondent. This is why the US embassy in Kuwait has been shut down. And earlier in the day we saw those horrific visuals coming from the US consulate in Karachi, which was also attacked by people. And this was the exclusive visuals, in fact, that our internal security editor Manoj Gupta had brought us. Horrific visuals, people being brought out, bloodied faces. One person was also being carried out, his body after he was shot. We believe that the US Marines had shot 20 Pakistanis dead for storming their consulate yesterday, and that is why today...
Yeah, there you're seeing it. There you're seeing some of those bloodied hands and faces and people shot and being carried out. You can see some of those pictures, those are dramatic pictures. And then, of course, let's just go back to the other photo of the Kuwait photo of the suspected attack on the US consulate there, and that's why the consulate is shut. Now, we don't know if there were people inside that consulate or not, but AFP putting out this photo of an area very close to the US consulate. Now, how are these missiles getting through if there is complete aerial dominance over Iran? One doesn't know. This is the question, viewers, because it is the Gulf countries, and let's talk about this. There are many Gulf countries that are facing a lot of heat, aren't they, Aman, because of these attacks. Let's go straight back to Tom Cooper, because I'm going to talk to him a little bit about that. We're going to also open the map. Viewers, this has been a war that could now turn into a bit of a quagmire for the United States. I know it's very early. I mean, it's very early to sort of talk about timelines, because it's only been 37, 38 hours. But the Americans were hoping. Yes, the Americans were hoping. The Americans were hoping that, look, at the end of the day, we were going to go in, we're going to knock out a few people, and that would be it. The Iranians would put their hands up and say, okay, sorry, we've come back to the table, and we're deciding to move with dialogue.
Well, that is the way Americans would have wanted it, but I think Iran is in for a long haul. Iran wants a long, protracted war, and that is why you see their strategy of bombing all the Middle East nations, and they're also attacking the US embassies because they see them also as a part of the US establishment in these countries. So after the various airports which were on attack, now we have the embassies of US also under attack from Iran.
Well, more news breaking, viewers, on your screens that France is ready to defend the Gulf states and Jordan. So this is now becoming a problem for the Western world, viewers. These are countries in the Gulf that had actually begun to give bases or their land for US bases, and they had allowed these Western nations to give them what is called a protective umbrella. Now, the Iranians have started hitting these countries. I'm not saying that there are massive damages, but some very tactical strikes. So on civilian infrastructure, as we have seen over the last few days, and Tom, let me bring you into this, because there has been information coming, and I'm going to pull out these pictures, and let's come to this map if it's possible for you to do so. We're going to look at these maps now, because this is Tel Aviv, isn't it? And we're being told that at least the Iranian media is claiming that the IRGC has reached this far and has struck a place where Netanyahu was having a meeting with his Air Force chief, so to speak, and that both are now sort of not around. So is this a wild claim? How could they have done it? Where would this missile have come from? And let's have a look at this first.
Well, I would guess. I can only guess. I don't know where exactly would this meeting have taken place. Somewhere in downtown Israel or further north, where there are big headquarters of the Mossad and Unit 8200, for example, which are frequently targeted by Iran already since 2 years. But I guess that the intelligence came actually from the Chinese again. They have so-called COMINT, this is communications intelligence, signals intelligence, ships underway in the Mediterranean, in the Indian Ocean, and so on. They are tracking the movement of US warships. They are tracking the movement, certainly, of Israeli warships. So they might have, for example, tracked down movement of Prime Minister Netanyahu.
So if we just open this map up.
Just for one more detail. Netanyahu is not a new target for Iranians, or actually for Hezbollah. Last year, Hezbollah attempted to hit his residence with a UAV.
I see.
And this was shot down shortly before reaching the residence. And he was in the residence in that moment. So it is possible that they have detected his movement in one way or the other. There are also sympathizers who might have reported, and so on and so on. So options are open.
So stay with me. Let's go straight across to Sanjay Suri. Sanjay Suri, thank you for joining us once again. I know difficult times, and there probably are air raid sirens sounding all around you from time to time. So thank you for taking this risk. But we're getting news that the Iranian media is claiming Iran's IRGC says that it has struck some locations where Netanyahu was meeting with one of his commanders, the commander of the Air Force, and that his whereabouts are no longer known. Now, is this what many people say psyops? Is this deliberate disinformation warfare? What is going on here? What are you hearing in the Iranian media? Israeli media.
Well, we've seen these we have seen some social media posts floating around. There is no confirmation of this. So far, the indications are that this is a rumor, but we've only just come across this kind of suggestion that is being circulated. So no official word on this yet, no word in the Israeli media, no word in any media out of Israel on this as yet. This would be quite extraordinary if true. It would have taken a lot for this to happen. It would have been a very dramatic, it is unlikely to be a small little drone here. We would be looking at a hypersonic ballistic missile that would seek to deliver a blow like this. And we have seen no evidence of that as of now.
Okay, so we don't quite know. Mr. Dogra, let me bring you into this conversation. You heard Lieutenant Colonel Conricus at one time in the Gaza conflict. He was the voice of the military in Israel, and he was broadcasting quite often from Israel and giving us updates. He's quite confident that this war is a one-way street, that the Iranians have nothing in the tank, that after a point they're just going to wither away the regime and the people will overthrow it. How do you assess that claim?
Well, I don't want to assess a propaganda reportage. That is what your Israeli guest was doing. But let me come back to this news about the attack on the Israeli Prime Minister's office. The public memory is short, but if you remember in the earlier confrontation between Israel and Iran had struck the garden of Netanyahu's residence. It did not cause much damage, but to the question as to how Iran was able to reach his office presently, the answer is that yes, if Israel has the capability of finding out where Khamenei was, Iran too has some resources. And the proof is, if indeed this missile hit the office of Netanyahu as it had hit one of the missiles or drones had hit his residence in the previous.
Iranian sources be? Would it be Chinese? I've been seeing a lot of pictures on the internet of Chinese technology which is now able to firmly focus on ships and exactly what those ships are carrying on the ground. Apparently there is this photograph, I don't know if you've seen it, of one of the US aircraft carriers with their entire weaponry lined up. All the crafts are lined up, different types of crafts are lined up, and you can see almost every plane individually. It's very clearly visible. Would this be the Chinese that are supplying this data? Because that was a commercial satellite almost. It's open source. It's all there.
Well, China has been...
Go ahead.
China has been quite open about it. In fact, it has been posting photographs after photographs of various ships carrying armament, one of which was hit.
Yeah.
But in this case, the question you're particularly asking, I would not like to pinpoint that it was Chinese. It could very well be Iranian sympathizers among Palestinians or anyone else.
Anyone else? Yes. Yes.
Add one more thing.
Yeah.
Early this or late last year, an IDF officer was arrested for espionage for Iran.
Right.
For doing this for money.
Okay.
So it could be that this is a similar case.
I just want you to also direct your attention to this photograph.
Yes, please.
Now, this photograph, can we just bring that photograph back, please? Thank you. That's the photograph. Now, we are being told that this is of the UK mission that was attacked. And this is an AFP photograph which shows some sort of a craft approaching this particular mission.
I can explain you. This would be Akrotiri on Cyprus.
Yes, Cyprus, that's right.
And this is a C-17 transport aircraft.
Okay.
So Akrotiri is on Cyprus, and it's a former British colony.
Yes.
And then they have retained some specific area of the island, and are using it ever since for military purposes.
So where would this be?
Just a second. Opa.
Yeah. There we
It's
go.
always a little bit.
It goes the other way.
Yes.
The Earth rotates. Even the map rotates. What a coincidence. There's Cyprus. Okay. So we're looking at this area, you're saying.
Just a second.
Where this
I'm
particular...
searching for Akrotiri because I don't remember where exactly was it. This is quite a big part of the island. It's actually British military zone.
Yes.
Limassol. Or is it down here?
There's something called Cochlea here.
I'm searching for Akrotiri.
Okay, Akrotiri. Anyhow, so we know that this has happened, and this is where we'll look for it, and we'll come to you in just a few moments. But you're saying that basically this is the area where this attack has taken place. So this military plane has flown all the way from Iran. Are you saying that? I mean,
not a military plane, but a missile.
Missile. Okay,
yes.
so this is a missile.
Apparently, 1 or 2 missiles were fired in that direction.
Right.
There are conflicting reports in regards whether they fell into the sea or whatever. The British wouldn't say more than that they have missed.
And they have missed. But clearly, something has happened because that British base is constantly looking under siege, viewers, and we're getting news now from there. And you also saw, of course, the other base in Kuwait that was struck apparently, or an area close to that, and that was the photo that Aman was showing on his phone, which we are going to bring out. We're going to take a very short break. We'll be right back with more updates, viewers, as this conflagration widens by the moment. We're right back. Don't go away.
That's exactly the point that we've also been discussing, and Tom was also saying that the target is meant to be these US assets in these ally countries, but because these are densely populated areas, they are inadvertently hitting civilian targets, because if civilians were indeed the target, the casualties could have been in hundreds.
That is, to use the American terminology, collateral damage.
Right, right. Lieutenant General D.P. Pandey, the sheer escalatory nature of this, as Ambassador Dogra was also highlighting, they've gone on to ask for Germany's help. They're also trying to involve France over here, because, say, UK has already reacted. In fact, Sir Keir Starmer also spoke about their fleet being involved. But if NATO were to get involved, what is the end game of this war? If NATO and these Middle Eastern US allies were to get involved, what happens?
So look, while
and
I
Iran
think,
has already indicated that they are not looking towards any negotiations now.
Yeah, Kanchal, it's too early for Iranians to talk about negotiations. It's just, again, this is something, not a war which is being fought between two street people. That also goes for a very long time. We are fighting a war with two military powers and two nations and two ideologies which are totally disparate and different. And it's about survival of Iranian regime's thought process, which is absolutely contrarian to this thing. While the Gulf states have already changed their thought process and they have aligned to the Western ideology to a great extent, but Iranians are totally polar opposite, and they have never changed their views for the last about 45-50 years. They remain where they remain. So to believe that it's going to just crumble, IRGC is not just not a slap dog onto a street that they can wish away. They will fight, they will control, and this will go on for some time. But I just want to add both the countries, the Israelis and Americans, and a lot of times people are saying that Trump has put Israel first this time. I don't think so. I think it's a war of Americans with Iran, and it is something to do with the Chinese. It is just not about Iran itself.
Yes,
so
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, so I think I told last time also on your this thing on your channel, but American immediate political objective is to change the strategic orientation of Iran. They should give up the ballistic missile systems, and because that was threat not only to America but more importantly to Gulf states eventually. So if you recall, while Saudi Crown Prince has said about a month back they will not allow their own airspace and ground to be attacked for Iran. But the fact of the matter is that he was the one who went urging, and Trump has said as much, that he came to me and telling this is going to be eventually a challenge. Because when the ballistic missile numbers, which in 2027 they were aiming to make to 8,000 that crosses, and the speed of missile crosses, There was no way Saudis could have protected themselves. So that is one. I think they want to change. The second.
Well, viewers, big news coming through. Moment by moment, the updates are flowing into our studio. The Israel Air Force and the Israeli Navy have, from what the latest news updates seem to suggest, intercepted dozens of drones launched at Israel from Iran. The IDF publishes footage showing a Navy warship shooting down a drone before reaching Israel's borders, and those are the pictures of the drone being taken apart by an Israeli warship. So where do you think this would have happened?
It is probably Haifa area, or in the south over Eilat. This is southernmost point in Israel. And the weapon used is probably going to be well known to quite a few Indian Air Force and Indian Army servicemen, because it's a Barak missile.
It's a Barak missile.
Yes.
How would you know it's a Barak missile?
Because this is the only SAM used by Israeli Navy.
I see. Well, that is a very, very interesting analysis there. Helps to have a military historian and military expert in the studio right next to you. In moments, you know what exactly is happening on the ground. And viewers, this is not the only place that the Iranians are looking at and targeting. I'm going to also show you some other inputs that we are getting. The US Embassy in Kuwait targeted by an Iranian drone, and I'm going to show you that picture. If we have that picture, there are also, of course, many more strikes. And if the Director Saab will now cooperate with me a little bit and show me all those pictures that we've been wanting to show you, viewers, for a while now. So can you show me all the pictures of all the multiple attacks here? So this is this US Embassy in Kuwait targeted by Iranian drones. That's what we are being told. What are we seeing here? This looks like quite a big amount of smoke.
Probably a car or something, a fire, or in the left lower corner.
That's right, here.
Yeah. You see the dark smoke.
Yes. So this is a car.
Even further left, behind this mold.
Okay,
yes.
Right. Okay, so that you think is a car?
I guess it's a car or something similar, something that is containing plastic and therefore smoking.
And what is all of this?
Smoke.
This is all smoke, and
there is nothing to be seen because it's hidden by the smoke. You see the buildings are behind that.
Yes, so we don't quite know now the extent of damage, but we do know that there are claims being made that the Iranian drone has also hit the runway of a UK military base in Cyprus. Now I want to go across to that, and we're also going to ask the Director Saab to put those visuals of the other attacks that have been taking place in the Gulf here in this screen behind me. So we're going to come to that in just a few moments. But look at this. This is what Tom Cooper has been trying to show us. This is Cyprus. And where is this UK base?
In southwestern corner, there is this peninsula. And Akrotiri Air Base is down here. You can see the runway.
Right.
Probably the rest is probably blotted out, or even if not particularly clear.
Yeah.
But this is a historic British base.
Okay.
Used already since 1930s, 1940s, and until today also used by allied nations, especially, for example, by Americans.
So we're being told that this runway is now being attacked. That's what we've been told. France says it's ready to take part in military operations to protect these Gulf states. Now, why are we talking about these Gulf states? Because if you have a look at this big map that we've got and the visuals, what has been happening since the morning, friends? And I can tell you this, and Tom is here with us, so we're going to discount Karachi for a moment. But in Kuwait, there was an F-15.
F-15E of the US Air Force shot down by Kuwaiti air defenses. The crew of two has survived.
So this is a friendly fire.
Yep.
Now, it's strange because the Air Defense Ministry has come out and said that there were several planes that have been struck and several pilots. That's the word they used. That's the phrase they used. So we don't quite know if this is the only one or there were others. Now, this is Jerusalem. Let's go back to those Gulf countries. There is Jerusalem last night. And there is Bahrain that is being peppered by drone attacks. This is
Manama Naval Base, headquarters of 5th Fleet again.
This is Bahrain. Again, this is, I believe, protests that are happening.
Shia, as I announced today in the morning, during the morning show, sooner or later we have to expect them to become active and to start protesting against the king.
So these could be Shia residents, or they could be resistance, we don't know, that is now protesting against the administration in Bahrain for giving sanctuary to US bases on their land. And then you have the Dubai. Dubai is also being peppered. And you can see these drones that are coming in constantly. And you have the Ahvaz area in Iran. So this is the counterattack. This is
Ahvaz is one of the biggest refineries in the
refineries that are being hit. So there's an attempt to also try and degrade the energy sources of Iran. And that's Bahrain, and there's a supposed